Welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at reproduction in animals. Remember, we have two types of reproduction, sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, we said that we're looking at a process where only one parent is involved in the production of offspring, while sexual reproduction looks at a type of reproduction that involves two parents. In this case, each parent produces a sex cell or gamete which is used for the production of offspring. In today's lesson, we're going to concentrate on sexual reproduction in animals. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the process of reproduction in a frog, identify male and female reproductive organs in human beings, explain the functions of the different organs of the human reproductive system, describe the biological changes associated with sexual development in human beings. Frogs reproduce once a year, and this is referred to as cyclic reproduction. You would have noticed that you'll hear frogs making sounds or noises during the rain season. This is because it is their time for mating. So during the rain season, the male makes a sound which is referred to as a croaking sound, which is a signal to the female to let it know that it is ready for mating. Once the male and the female come together, the male then mounts the female and rubs against its back. This causes the female to release eggs. The male then releases its spermatozoa on top of these eggs. So unlike other animals, frogs do not show any parental care to their offspring. So as soon as the eggs are laid and the spermatozoa released, they are left to develop on their own. So to ensure that fertilization will take place, the eggs are released in large numbers, and they also contain a yolk which is highly nutritious. The nutrients from this yolk will be available to the developing egg. The egg also has a protective jelly-like fluid around it. So this type of reproduction, where the eggs are being fertilized outside the body of the animal, is referred to as external fertilization. Human beings reproduce sexually, and for this purpose, they have specialized systems. So in human beings, we find the male reproductive system as well as the female reproductive system. Each of these is found on an individual person. But of course, you might have read of certain cases where we might have a person having both sexes, which are the hermaphrodites or the bisexuals. But the normal is that each person should only have one sex, and therefore refer to people as either being male or female. The male reproductive system functions in the production of spermatozoa, also commonly called the sperm, while the female reproductive system functions in the production of ova, which are commonly called the eggs. So remember that each of these cells are what help human beings produce their young in a sexual way. Let us first look at the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system, remember we said that, is in charge of production of spermatozoa, which are commonly known as sperm. It is made of the vas deferens, also known as the sperm duct, the urethra, the penis, the epididymis, the testis, the prostate gland, and the seminal vesicles. For most diagrams, you also find parts such as the urinary bladder, as well as the rectum and anus. But remember that these are not part of the reproductive system. So each of these parts has got their own function to play in the process of reproduction. The testis is where the sperm or spermatozoa are produced. So it is the major part when it comes to reproduction in males with regards to production of gametes. Apart from producing sperm, it also secretes the hormone known as testosterone. Remember, testosterone is the male sex hormone. We have the epididymis, where we find sperm being stored just after they are produced within the testes. It is also within the epididymis that the sperm undergo maturation. So this simply implies that before maturation, the sperm cannot move to the sperm duct. It is only after they become mature that they are passed on to the sperm duct. The sperm duct, or the vas deferens, is a tube that carries sperm from the epididymis to the urethra. So think of it as a passage through which sperm move from the epididymis to the urethra so that they can be taken outside the body of the male. From the sperm duct, we also have the urethra, which carries semen and urine. We also have the penis that is in charge of depositing semen into the vagina during sexual intercourse. So you can think of the penis as being a copulation organ. We have the prostate gland and the semenovascus, which both produce fluids that make up the semen. Remember that semen is a mixture of fluids as well as sperm. Sperm are not deposited as they are individual cells, but instead they are mixed in other fluids and together they are known as semen. So the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles together produce fluids that would create an alkaline environment for the survival of the sperm, as well as producing nutrients that nourish the sperm as they are moving through the male and even as they are deposited. Now let us take a look at the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system, remember, is in charge of production of ova as well as secretion of female sex hormones, which are progesterone as well as progesterone. The female reproductive system is made of the ovaries, the fallopian tube or oviduct, the uterus, the cervix, as well as the vagina. Of course, you might find other parts like the uterine wall as well as the endometrium. The functions of these parts in reproductions are: for the ovaries, we have formation of ova and secretion of progesterone as well as progesterone. So this simply implies that the ovaries are the ones that are in charge of formation of the sex cells or the gametes in females. We have the oviduct, which is a tube from the ovaries coming down to the uterus through which the ovum travels. It is also within the oviduct that fertilization takes place, so meaning that it is the site for fertilization. We have the uterus, which is the site for implantation and development of the fetus. In preparing for fertilization or pregnancy, we find that the uterus lining develops a good blood supply. It is this blood supply that is shed off during menstruation. Another part of the female reproductive system that we have is the cervix. The cervix simply connects the vagina to the uterus. It is some sort of, you can think of it as a neck. It's a neck that is joined in two parts, like your neck joins your head to your body, isn't it? In the same way, we have the cervix that joins the uterus to the cervix. Apart from forming a passage between the vagina and the uterus, the cervix also forms part of the birth canal, and it is also where semen are deposited during sexual intercourse, and it also secretes fluids that help lubricate the vagina. The last part of the female reproductive system is the vagina. This is the part where we have the penis being inserted during sexual intercourse, and it also forms part of the birth canal. Sexual characteristics. When you look at sexual characteristics, think of them as being physical traits of an organism that help you determine its biological sex. So we have two types of sexual characteristics. We have the primary sexual characteristics as well as the secondary sexual characteristics. So in the primary sexual characteristics, we're looking at the physical behavioral traits that a person is born with. So we're looking at things like the sex organs as well as the reproductive systems. So the primary sexual characteristics are more of a person being either male or they are female. And we know that that is dependent on the sexual organs that they possess or their reproductive systems. The secondary sexual characteristics, on the other hand, are physical behavioral traits that a human being would develop upon reaching puberty. So these characteristics, that is the secondary sexual characteristics, are influenced by the secretion of hormones. In males, they're influenced by testosterone, while in females, they're influenced by estrogen. Remember that each of these hormones will be secreted at puberty, and when these hormones are secreted, they'll each bring in different changes. So we see that in both sexes, we see things like development of pubic hair. In males, we'll see things like development of facial hair as well. We'll see development of armpit hair, that is in both sexes. In males, we see the body becoming more muscular. We also have the penis becoming larger. In females, we're looking at the breasts growing, their figure becoming more rounded. You hear even their voice might become sharper, while a boy's voice might become lower or it breaks. While I say somebody's voice is becoming deep. So what you are seeing or observing are the secondary sexual characteristics. So something that you notice about these characteristics is that though each all try and influence reproduction, they are trying to maximize the chances of these organisms reproducing. You find that most of these characteristics make one attractive to the opposite sex. We've now reached the end of today's lesson. Thank you for listening as well as reading the slides. For any clarity, please feel free to ask or go through the slides that have accompanied this lesson. Questions will be uploaded in due course. Thank you for listening.